All right, Jim, our next question sent to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Alec in Silicon Valley. Hi, Jim and Brian. I've sent this email a few times and did not get a response.
Well, you know whose fault that is.
But I'm a software engineer, so I program my computer to keep emailing you guys daily until my question is read. I know it's a worthwhile question. If it's a worthwhile answer, if it's worthwhile to answer questions about wrestlers slapping themselves, then this should be good. I'm wondering if you guys know anything about the history of the Irish whip. I've always thought that even though this is a staple of wrestling, it seems highly implausible and makes it hard for me to suspend my disbelief. You can't make somebody run and bounce off the ropes by pulling them. At best, they would trip over their own feet. At worst, they would just stop in their tracks. As two guys who appreciate the perceived legitimacy of wrestling, do you think the Irish whip comes across as very phony?
If you're sitting there and staring at it and your mission is to break it down, then yes, you can break down everything. But the question is, when people do something and establish something well enough that you're willing to go with it, it doesn't strike you visually as something off kilter, like it's not like you're seeing an airplane wing on a submarine, then your mind goes with it. And that was established somewhat early in wrestling, that if you throw someone into the ropes or they run into the ropes to get some momentum and they're bouncing off or whatever, there used to be more care taken in it, as everything at the start. If you had a headlock on a guy and a guy was going to throw you into the ropes, he wouldn't just shrug his body and you take off and run 10 or 12 feet to the ropes. He would start running with you and he would shove you off out of the headlock, and you would hit the ropes kind of off balance and be coming back, but you'd hit him with a tackle and you could make it work. With the arm whip, when guys actually grabbed the guy's hand and pushed him back with your right hand, and you got the momentum of the ropes going, and you pulled and you had the stance and you took steps with it and you followed through, and the guy's going and you're shoving him off with your right hand like everybody did it when the shoot off started, then that looked kind of okay. And you've seen the footage from the 50s of Buddy Rogers running those off-kilter spots where he would look off balance, where he's
yeah.
He looks like he's out of control and waving his arms even though he's not, but it looked like it was. Those things were done, and then a bunch of guys started copying it and doing it and putting less into it, and then it became an accepted thing, and now you have what I call the Vader arm whip, where poor Leon would just grab a guy by the arm and just fucking fling him with one arm and kind of touch him with the hand as he went by, not even taking a step, and the guy's going to run 20 feet corner to corner. Or the headlock shoot off where the guy just with his right hand just kind of shoves the guy off. Or now these head palm shoot offs where you just put your hand on the back of a guy's head and just will him into the ropes and he runs. Yeah, that's all bullshit. I can testify to you that I've been shot into the ropes by 4 or 5 times by guys that I had no choice but to go. I had a choice whether I came back or not, but you can, especially some of the bigger guys in this business, you can arm whip a motherfucker to where he's going to go to those ropes. He might not turn and hit him smoothly with his, back and the arm over the top rope the way he's supposed to, but he'll go into the ropes. Coming back, the question may remain. But that's the idea, is things were established when they looked halfway like they could happen. And then guys just started doing them and overdoing it and doing it too much, and everybody starts doing it, and it slowly loses the original. But the original Irish whip was not even a whip into the ropes or a whip into the turnbuckles. The original Irish whip, who was Dano O'Mahony, was the first one, right?
He was certainly the first one to popularize it. He may have been the first one to ever do it. I'm not quite sure.
But the reason why it's called the Irish whip is because Dano O'Mahony in the 30s was a huge box office attraction. They put the world title on him. He was especially big in Boston and points in the Northeast because he was Irish. Imagine that, an Irishman in Boston being over. Who would have thought that? And his Irish whip was he would grab a guy's wrist with both of his hands.
See, I like that kind of Irish whip.
Yeah. And it was a combination of I'm jerking you and I'm ducking under your arm and I'm jerking down. And it was the whip where the guy took a front flip and it was like a judo throw with the holding the wrist. And that was the Irish whip. And that's what he actually won his matches with in some cases. And then when people started grabbing the wrist and ducking under it, but instead of jerking the guy into a forward flip, remember in the footage you see from the 50s and 60s, a guy will grab the wrist and he'll duck under the arm and twist the arm first before he shoots the guy off. So it's like he's not only got more control of it, but also that's the way that O'Mahony went into it. That's why the whip-off started being called an Irish whip. The shoot-off, rather, started being called an Irish whip. You whip a guy into the ropes. And even when I started watching wrestling in the early 70s, it was up to the announcer because a lot of times when a guy would get a wrist lock and just do the thing where he ducks under and jerks the guy and he does the forward flip, that was the Irish whip to some announcers. Some announcers would only call it if it was the original version where you duck under the arm and not only jerk the guy forward, but flip him so that he's taking a rolling flip all the way across the ring. And then some announcers started calling it an Irish whip into the ropes when you just shot a guy off into the ropes. So it's evolved that way. But yes, in some cases it looks ridiculous. And in other cases, it looks good, and it depends on the perpetrators.